Dr. Shalke, I'm going to just take the view of the participants. Please manage the.
Professor Miller, good afternoon from Uzbekistan. We are really sorry for the delay. We are waiting for a few more minutes and then we'll be starting the session. And meanwhile, we have our first Deputy Director of Amity University in Tashkent, Dr. Naina Chaudhary ma'am, who has joined us right now.
Good afternoon, Professor Miller. It is such a pleasure to see you. I would really like to thank you on behalf of all the faculty members and students because it really means a lot to us for you to take out time, for an eminent personality of your stature, interacting with our students, it means a lot. And I will just give you a brief uh, history of Amity Tashkent. You've been associated with Amity for a very long time. I was with Professor Gurinder Singh sir earlier. That is why I am aware. So about Amity Tashkent, we have opened this campus in 2019 only. After things were normalized after COVID, we thought of starting this international guest lecture series where month by month we invite international guests or the alumni. The alumni who are doing really well to share their experiences with the students. This university was opened with the support of ministry, and they were basically opening the economy for strengthening the IT education. So they were looking for the universities who can bring in quality education, and especially in the field of IT. So we are basically in Tashkent, we are IT university, and that is why our IT students have registered in large number. But we wanted when we organize these lectures in the auditorium, normally there are so many students, so we wanted it to be completely focused because it is aligned. This sustainable development goals is the part of their curriculum also. So this is completely aligned to their curriculum, and I'm 100% sure that they will have a lot of takeaways from this session. But it is such an honor to have you, and I just hope someday we will welcome you in person also to the campus. Thank you so much, sir. I shall quickly follow up with the faculty to let the students settle down very quickly, and we shall start in 2 minutes, sir.
Super. Thank you. Thank you so much for that very warm welcome. Very much appreciated. I realize I probably have not got quite the right title on my slide, but we'll get to that just shortly. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. The issue of technology, social change, and SDGs is very much what I'll be talking about this morning. I'm not sure that I'll quite take up the whole 1.5 hours. And I'm not
Yes.
sure whether or not the plan would be that there would be questions at the end, but perhaps somebody could. I'm happy to do either. I don't really mind.
Yes. Topic is okay, but students get a lot of inspiration while interacting with personalities like you. They want to know about your success stories. What is the way to reach to that kind of level? So I am looking forward to a very inspiring lecture. I will just tell the faculty members to quickly call the students. We had a lot of registrations, but we wanted to keep it very focused.
Yes. No problem.
Yes. Yeah. Give me 5 minutes and we'll start, sir.
No problem. No problem. Plenty of time.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I will just take 5 minutes. I'll have to turn off the camera. Give me 1 minute.
Yes, Dr. Sudhanshu, is my voice audible to the students? All right, okay.
Yes, ma'am, you are audible.
Thank you. So let us start here. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, Professor Miller. Before we start, I'd like to give a brief introduction of Professor Miller to the students here. For information, Professor Miller, we have students from the background of management and social sciences, and we have few students from IT, information technology. Introducing Professor Miller here, it is my absolute pleasure to introduce today's distinguished guest, Professor James Miller, who currently serves as the Principal and Vice Chancellor of University of West Scotland. Professor Miller holds the unique honor of being the first nurse appointed as University Principal and Vice Chancellor in Scotland, having begun his remarkable career as a clinical nurse in Edinburgh. His vast experience and visionary leadership have positioned him as a key figure in both higher education and healthcare. In his academic career, Professor Miller has contributed extensively as a visiting lecturer at 4 Scottish universities, educating undergraduate and master's students in nursing, healthcare management, and clinical leadership. His research, published in both national and international peer-reviewed journals, addresses key issues in clinical management and healthcare, and he continues to contribute as a reviewer for several renowned journals. Today, dear students, we are incredibly fortunate to have Professor Miller with us to share his insights on the topic of technology, social change, and sustainable development goals. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Professor James Miller. Professor Miller, over to you.
Thank you so much for that warm introduction, and good afternoon, everyone in Tashkent. It's just after 8:15 in the morning here in the United Kingdom. It's a great pleasure to join you. Thank you so much for that introduction. I did want to start just giving a little bit of a background to my own career, but that has largely been covered. But I'll give you one or two additional items because it is absolutely not a traditional route from becoming a clinical nurse to becoming the Vice Chancellor of one of the largest universities in Scotland. And one of the key things that has been a feature of my career in the various organisations where I have worked, there are kind of two things in particular I would suggest, and things that I would suggest that you should keep in mind as you think about your own career developing. The first thing is that the organisations that I have worked in, and they have been many and varied, from small specialist institutions and vast organisations like the NHS in the United Kingdom, is that they have all been values-based. They have always had a strong values base in what they undertake and how they undertake it. And secondly, from my perspective, is that they have all been excellent in their own ways. So being values-driven and striving for excellence are two things that I think you should always keep in mind as you develop your career in the coming years. And think about that now as you are undergraduate students. Think about how that applies to what you are learning. Think about how that applies to the way that you are learning, and think about how that impacts not only on you as an individual, but the communities that you serve, both in the towns that you live, in the regions that you live, but what impact is that going to have globally? That might seem a bit lofty, given where you are in your academic career at the moment, but think about that for the future, and think about that in terms of the impact that you will have, because in the not too distant future, these are the impacts that you will be having. In terms of the connections between Amity University and the University of the West of Scotland, I have had a long connection with Amity over a number of years, and I serve on their international advisory board. And I had the great good pleasure of visiting the Noida campus in the not too distant past, and I'm looking forward to joining once again next year. And I do hope that at some point I will be able to visit the Tashkent campus. But as well as my personal connection with Amity University, the University of the West of Scotland last year signed a strategic partnership agreement with Amity University in order to forge closer developments, both from an academic perspective, but also from a perspective of student mobility, staff mobility, and so on. And indeed, one of our students recently joined Amity for its immersion programme. So the connection, both at a personal level and at an institutional level, between Amity, myself, and UWS is a very important one, and one that I hope to see going from strength to strength in the not too distant future. Today, I've been asked to talk to you about technology, social change, and the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. And I would certainly hope to be able to cover all of those items today. Now, with a topic as broad as this, then as you might imagine, I'm not going to be covering absolutely every aspect of it. But what I hope to be able to do is to provide a degree of thoughtful provocation of some of the issues that I think, as undergraduates, you should be thinking about. But some of these issues are ones that we are grappling with, not just within universities or even within technological companies, but all aspects of social life, of all aspects of life, because there isn't really anything now that doesn't impact us in some way or another. Many of you will be familiar with this particular slide. This is the coronavirus. And many of you will have had your education impacted one way or another by the global phenomenon that struck the world in 2020 and in many cases is still having an impact, not just in the health of nations, but also in terms of the way in which we interact with each other, the way business has changed, the way technology has been used in very different ways in healthcare, in education, and indeed in business. But the very essence, the very genesis of this is built from a technology, development of a technology within a laboratory, and the impact that has had over not just a number of years, but right across the world. So coronavirus, whilst the immediate impact of it has now largely subsided in terms of the global lockdowns that we saw, the impact that it has had is still felt right across the world. And we cannot ignore the fact that, again, the way in which this virus is mutating and new strains are developing all the time, it means that it is going to be with us for some time. But hopefully, we have now developed the appropriate vaccinations to ensure that populations can be inoculated against it, but also that we have learned how to manage such pandemics and epidemics right across the world. Again, the impact that has had on society, the impact that it's had on technology, education, and that wider social interaction cannot be underestimated. So whilst this is now an issue that has passed, the impact lives with us on a day-to-day basis. And the other area I would suggest that is having such a huge impact on society is the climate change and the climate change emergency that we are seeing in different parts of the world. And for some, this might seem a bit of a distant impact or something that might not necessarily impact on their careers. But in all of the subjects that you are studying as students, the impact of climate and climate change must be taken into account. It is going to affect absolutely everything that we do from here on in. And some of the signals that we have had over, I would say, even the past 4 and 5 decades of impact on climate change, some of which has been driven by technology, have been largely ignored. And we're seeing the impacts of some of that, some of those issues not being tackled at the time because they were either seen as being too far in the distance in terms of time, too remotely involved in individuals' lives or careers, and of course the impact that climate change denial has had on whether or not we have been able to tackle some of the problems that we've seen for a number of years now, but also that we are likely to see in the future. And as I was saying, much of that climate change has been driven by technology over decades, and you can go all the way back to Industrial Revolution in the way in which emissions from the use of fossil fuels has changed the climate over all of those years, and the impact that is now having. And you may have seen some recent reports around the melting of some of the glaciers around the world. Most recently, one which is a glacier about the size of the United Kingdom, so a significant area, and that is melting at a much faster rate than was first imagined. So whilst we are all applying some changes to our lives, into the way that we are working, into the way that we are living, the impact on the impact on climate is huge. And again, the rise of wildfires across the world are yet another indication of that. So what has been the role of technology in driving social change? Well, here are 2 particular quotes that I think help to put this into some kind of context. Digital technology, including its omnipresence, connectedness, and its powerful artificial intelligence, is the most recent long wave of humanity's socio-economic evolution. And less than 1% of the world's technological stored information was in digital format in the 1980s, surpassing more than 99% in 2012. For every 2.5 to 3 years, humanity is able to store more information than since the beginning of civilization. The rise of digital technology, the way in which artificial intelligence is affecting absolutely everything that we do. But just look at that, data there. Less than 1% of the world's technological stored information was in digital format in the late 1980s. So 40 years ago, and now it's more than 99%. And you can just imagine the size and development of the way in which technology is now storing that information in digital format. Humanity is able to store more information than since the beginning of civilization. What an amazing fact that is. So what is going to happen in the next 2 to 3 years, the next 5 years, the next 10 years, if we think about the way in which these things have changed over the last 5 or 10 years, then the rate of change, the rate in which this is going to impact everybody's lives is only going to accelerate over the next 5 to 10 years. And one of the things that has challenged everybody but particularly I want to think about the way it has challenged universities, and the way that we have learned is artificial intelligence. How has artificial intelligence affected the way that we learn, the way that you learn currently as a student, and how will that change, not just through your academic career, but how will that impact on the way in which you enter the world of work, and what you will do when you get into that world of work. And when we saw the rise of artificial intelligence, such as ChatGPT, for example, we heard the way in which it was impacting on universities, and that call to whether it should be banned in the classroom, whether it should be banned as part of an educational process. And we'll come on to talk about that in a little while. And I'll give you my own view of how artificial intelligence, particularly tools like ChatGPT, not only impact in higher education, but how they can be used. And I would suggest that there are 5 principles for the use of artificial intelligence in higher education. And this comes from actually from some work that was done in Newcastle University in the north of England. And these 5 principles are, as outlined here: AI should be used responsibly and ethically. And again, you will have heard and seen in world commentary the way in which some people who were at the very forefront of developing artificial intelligence and tools like ChatGPT have now moved away from them, have moved away from some of the companies that have been developing them, because they did not believe that they were being used responsibly and ethically. So as a principle, and I'm talking primarily here as far as higher education is concerned, but you can see how these can be applied into the world of work. AI should be transparent and acknowledged. So when we are using it, we must be clear that we are using it, and we must be clear that we are using it in a questioning way, not simply accepting everything that is being said through a model, through a large language model like ChatGPT, for example. And if you are in any doubt of that, then here's a good exercise for you to try. Log into ChatGPT and ask them to give you 500 words about you. Put your name in it and ask them to give you 500 words. I did that, and I was amazed at what I had achieved over those 500 words, because believe me, not everything it comes up with is accurate. So do not accept everything at face value. Make sure that you are using this technology in a questioning way, while you're able to do that responsibly and ethically. And make sure that when you are using it, you're acknowledging that you are using it, and acknowledging that you are recognizing its shortcomings as well. AI should not be able to pass a course or a module. What this simply means is we have to think about how we are designing the content and curriculum and assessment for our higher education programs. So as educators, we must think about the use of AI and how we must think about how it is being used. And again, I would look to history here to think about how we have looked at technology developments within education in the past. Let me take you back. Everybody in this room is far too young to think about this, but there will be people that will know about it. When electronic calculators were first introduced, we did not decide that electronic calculators ought to be banned in the classroom. What we did was we changed the way in which we taught arithmetic, statistics, and mathematics, and we changed the way in which we assessed how that was undertaken, so that we were testing the knowledge. We were testing someone's ability to use a calculator not whether or not they simply were able to give you the correct answer. And as we have seen in many research studies and some work that I did myself, looking at the use of calculators, the dangers of simply accepting the answer that the technology gives you. And with a calculator where you might use it, for example, on developing or on calculating drug dosages, if you simply accept the answer, then you are in danger of being out by a factor of 10 or 100, because it's usually the decimal point that's in the wrong place. So think about the history of that, think about how that can be used, and think about how we develop the curriculum, how we develop the assessment strategy that goes along with it. The positive use of AI should be encouraged. I think what I've said over the last few minutes should encourage you to use it, but use it ethically, use it in a responsible way, and make sure that it is transparent and acknowledged. And what I've said here is university practices should evolve with artificial intelligence. That applies to every sector. That applies to the workplace. It applies to whether you're going into technology field or a management field or whichever field you are going to go into. Artificial intelligence is going to impact on what you do, and your practice should evolve as a result of this, because this is not going away. And there are lots of fears that artificial intelligence is going to take jobs away from people. It's going to take over certain aspects of our lives. And what I would say to you is artificial intelligence may not take away your job in the future. Someone who uses artificial intelligence may well take away your job in the future. So 5 principles for the use of artificial intelligence that are worth considering, not just in your academic careers, but also in your work life as well. One of the things that I wanted to talk about just in the passing is not to forget that learning is a social activity, and there are a number of different perspectives worth thinking about here as we think about learning, not just in your current academic career, but as you go on into further study. And by that, I don't mean, of course, that does mean whether you might go on to study at master's level or even go on to study at doctoral level as well. But learning is much more than just what you will do in the classroom in university. How will you learn in your work environment? How will you ensure that you have that lifelong learning approach to everything that you do? And wherever and whatever way you are learning, it is a social activity. Whether you're doing that through collaboration and cooperation as a team, whether you're doing that through peer learning, as I'm sure you are currently involved in your current area, whether you're developing that social context and that cultural perspective. How do you learn? Not just from mixing with different cultures, different norms. How do you make sure that you've got that broader perspective from not just your colleagues in the classroom or from your professors, but from society in general? And how do you ensure that you're using that learning to make sure that social change can be brought about? And how can you make sure that the very principles of equality, diversity, and inclusion are part and parcel of what we do in our daily lives and in everything that we do? This reference here is suggesting that there are 6 ways in which technology is breaking down barriers into social change. Empowering with information, teaching and engaging, making matches, crowdsourcing hotspots, reaching the underserved, and raising cash for good. I'm not going to go into all of these, but I just wanted to pick out two in particular that I think are particularly relevant to what you are doing at the moment, the subjects that you are studying, and the world of work that you are about to go into. Empowering with information. Now, let me just go back to one of my earlier slides where I talked about the amount of information, the amount of data that is now being stored digitally. How empowering is that, being able to access that data, that information in a way that we have never been able to do in any part of history. And I'll come on to talk about the rate of change and the impact that that has had just in a short while. But as well as empowering with information, being able to access that information brings responsibility and accountability for how you use that information in a very clear, ethical, and responsible way. How do we make sure that when we've got all of this information, we are using it for the common good? We are using it to make sure that we are changing societies, that we are changing them for the better. And very much linked to that is around how technology has broken down barriers in teaching and engaging. The fact that we are able to have this very kind of interaction that we're having at the moment is only possible through the power of technology, using the platform that we are using at the moment. But think about the ways in which we have been able to do that, or it has been developed over the years through things like MOOCs, for example, massive online open courses that were developed over the last 20 years and made freely available to a much wider audience than ever might have been available before. Not only is that being provided from some very prestigious universities from across the world, but it's making sure that students and professors can be engaged in a way through a much wider audience than perhaps has ever been in the past. The way in which we actually deliver higher education through the flipped classroom, so that you as students are learning in very different ways, making sure that we are not creating artificial barriers to those who may not have in the past been able to access higher education, whether that is through by using technology because they may have had some disability or some learning, some opportunity not to access education, which might relate to financial or social background. Teaching and engaging, empowering with information, two of the most important issues in the ways in which technology has broken down barriers to social change. And I want to talk a wee bit too about how technology has impacted on social innovation as well. So what do we mean by social innovation? Social innovation is the process of developing and deploying effective solutions to challenging and often systemic social and environmental issues in support of social progress. This is a definition from the Stanford School of Business. So when we think about not only what we are doing as part of higher education within universities, but as we go into our careers, how can we think of social innovation as part and parcel of everything that we do in whatever field that we end up in, whether we are in commerce, whether we're in finance, whether we're in health, whether we are in education, whether we are in any of the cultural, the arts, how can we make sure that whatever we are doing, we are thinking about social innovation, the technology that we are using, and ensuring that we are supporting social progress. I mentioned earlier on that in the the most recent history, the way in which technology has transformed where we are. And I find this slide a particularly powerful slide in communicating that change. So if we go, and it really is three particular aspects. So if we think about this aspect here around transforming material, if we go back where materials were transforming what we were doing, when we moved from stone to bronze to iron, these technologies at their time, or these materials at their time, were transforming everything that humanity was undertaking. And then we moved into that transforming energy, whether that was through water, steam, electric, or combustion. Think about all of these aspects and think about the Industrial Revolution that had during these times. And also think about the fact that the impact that we are still living with through steam and electricity, because the way in which we have developed that and the progress that we saw in the late 19th, early 20th century is now living with us in the 21st century in the climate change that I talked about earlier. And so you can see that we're talking about here, from here to here, we're talking about millennia. We're talking about hundreds and thousands of years. And yet when we are talking about transforming information, we're talking about small numbers of years, perhaps decades at most. And I've taken this up to 2008. You know, we're nearly 20 years beyond that, thinking about how not only are we communicating and storing information, but how we are using the development of information through knowledge and through algorithms, so that we can see from this a very powerful way in which the way in which information is transforming what we are doing, and the way that we are doing it is now multiplying over small numbers of years, as opposed to where we had before using material or energy, it was using centuries, if not millennia. Moving on to talking about the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. You will all be, I suspect, at least familiar with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, established in 2015 with a goal, with an aim to transforming the world through these 17 goals by 2030. And 2030 is only 6 years away. And we can have a good conversation about how close we are to achieving some of the goals as they have been set out here. And in a recent study, it was identified that actually the recognition and understanding of the Sustainable Development Goals across the world is very patchy, and indeed, probably in the Western world, it's probably at its lowest in terms of its understanding and working towards achieving some of these aims, and many of them at the current rate of progress will not be met. Some of them for hundreds of years, not just a few years, but hundreds of years, which means that we have to ensure that we are stepping up the rate of progress across all 17 of these goals. Arguably, there isn't a single one of these 17 goals that will be achieved without the input from the learning, teaching, and research that is offered by universities across the world. And therefore, the impact that higher education will have across all 17 of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals is absolutely imperative. And you must think about it not just in terms of your current curriculum, but question everything that you are going to be thinking about. How can you make sure that you are thinking about, in whichever subject matter you're talking about, the impact that it's going to have on at least one, if not more, of these Sustainable Development Goals? And as you move into your career, how can you ensure that you, as the next generation, are thinking about the impact that you can have on achieving these Sustainable Development Goals? But if we think about each one of them across the higher education spectrum, again, I'm not going to go through all of these in huge detail, but I want to pick out one or two of them. So let's start with the very first goal and how education can impact on that no poverty aim. Access to education for those who cannot afford it is a key element of not just achieving what we want to achieve through the Sustainable Development Goals, but it will be, I would argue, one of the greatest impacts on everyone's lives right across the world. And I talked earlier on about the way in which technology was breaking down barriers for social change and for social good, and providing educational technology platforms that will allow access to education for those who cannot afford it will by quite a long way have the greatest impact, because for every other of the goals, if we do not have that baseline education for everyone, then we will not achieve what it is we want to achieve. And that feeds directly into SDG 4, access to high quality education. So technology is not just about making sure that it's accessible, but it's accessible to high quality education as well. And I'll come on to talk about some of the others in terms of reducing inequalities in a short time. But all of the others that you see on this particular site again relate not just to how we provide education, but also how those that we provide it to can benefit from things like zero hunger, gender equality, and so on. So every single one of these 17 goals will only be achieved through what we can do within universities and what we do when we leave university and go into the world of work in whatever field. And I mentioned earlier on the reducing inequalities. So how do we ensure that improved access to labour markets and research and employability? And you may be familiar with the Times Higher Education impact assessments, that social impact studies that are conducted every year for universities who are contributing to the Sustainable Development Goals. And I personally am extremely proud of the fact that for SDG 10, reducing inequalities, my university, the University of the West of Scotland, is 16th in the world for improving access to labour markets and research on employability. So if you're not familiar with the social impact rankings from the Times Higher Education publication, I would encourage you to go and look at it. Amity University is also contributing hugely to all of the SDGs, not just in relation to the programs that it is delivering, but that wider social mission that we share. And it is for that reason, with that shared mission, that shared values that my university and your university has, that we agreed to have our strategic partnership agreement that we have in place. And we firmly believe that through that partnership, we can have a positive impact on the lives of all of our students and well beyond. Because if we can think about the way in which we are changing your lives and the way that you will then change other people's lives, the ripple effect that universities have on all of these aspects of the Sustainable Development Goals is almost incalculable. But you have an opportunity, and I would suggest you have a responsibility to make sure that you're using your education from your university to ensure social change in the future. And I look forward to seeing that happening in due course. I'd suggest to you that there are 5 considerations that we need to think about for the next decade. How will we ensure that the technological integration into teaching and learning will achieve what we want to achieve in developing solutions to the Sustainable Development Goals, whether we're talking about virtual reality or the artificial intelligence methods that I talked about earlier. The way in which we are learning through blended learning, so that we are not always simply sitting in classrooms, but we are able to use technology to advance our learning, but also the way in which we learn. So at an undergraduate level, there's an opportunity to stop and to start. And then when you are in your moving on to master's level study, how can you do that through developing that lifelong learning and continuous education through micro-credentials, short courses, and CPD? That lifelong learning, once you have left university, cannot be underestimated. But also making sure that we have student-centred approaches so that we are giving that competency-based education that I talked about earlier, so that we are not simply pushing out facts and expecting them to be absorbed and then regurgitated. And re-emphasising my earlier point about learning being a social activity. How can we make sure that we are collaborative and making sure that we have that interdisciplinary learning? Because very rarely do we solve these issues, do we solve the problems that are identified in the SDGs on our own or through a single discipline. They are done entirely by coming together, working as teams, using our creativity to make sure that we can achieve what it is we want to achieve. And as we move out of education, as you move out of education into the world of work, as I mentioned earlier on, think about the places that you want to work. Think about their levels of excellence. Think about the values that they will drive and make sure that they are aligned to your own values. Make sure that they will deliver what it is you want to deliver as an individual. And one of the things that you should think about in any of the companies that you want to develop into, work with, and so on, is what is their approach to ESG, to environmental, social, and governance. Think about all of these aspects. And every company is now thinking about how they can contribute to the environment, how they can contribute to social justice, and how they are ensuring that within their business good governance is being deployed at all times. And this is much more than just about organizations ensuring that they are doing social good. When investors are now looking at companies, they too want to know that they are investing in strong, ethical, values-driven companies. And one of the ways in which that they will do that is how they can demonstrate their impact through their ESG approaches. Of course, there is uncertainty. We are living in a time when who knows what is going to come in the next 5 years. And as I said earlier on, if we think about how things have changed in the last 5 years, they have changed so dramatically. How do we think that they are going to change in the next 5 years? But the programs that you are undertaking are giving you, are equipping you with the knowledge, the skills, and the expertise to ensure that you can navigate life's twists and turns. But being an undergraduate also allows you to develop new ways of thinking. It allows you to develop new areas, and most importantly, to give you the confidence and the courage to navigate what is coming your way. And you will learn a lot through what you are doing in the classroom at the moment. You will learn a lot as you go into practice, but you must learn from the mistakes that you've made, that we all made. We have all made mistakes in the past, and we can spend a lot of time thinking about what those were, thinking about the impact that you have had. But you must learn from your mistakes. You must learn and move on, not to dwell in them. And what I would say to you is, when you look back on something that you have done, whether that's a project, whether that's a submission as an assignment, whether that's just something in your lives, and we often talk about lessons learned from adverse situations. And what I would encourage you to think about is it is not good enough simply to identify the lessons. You must learn the lessons as well and change and adapt to ensure that you are learning from what you are doing. This, I thought, was a really important message. Which is more important, asked the big panda, the journey or the destination? And the tiny dragon replies, it's the company. Now, many of you will draw all sorts of messages from that metaphor. But for me, it's about, what are the values that you are bringing? What is the help that you are providing for others? What is the impact that you are going to think about as you move into that next phase of your either academic journey or moving into the world of work? How are you going to make a difference? How are you going to use that knowledge, that skills, that level of expertise that you are developing in your undergraduate program to make a difference in your lives, in your families' lives, in your communities' lives, and ultimately for the benefit of the whole world? You are getting to a stage where this is going to be your reality in the not too distant future. You are going to be graduating from a very, very proud, a very distinguished university. And you need to think about how you are going to use that skill, that talent to make a difference. Thinking about how you can use technology, thinking about how you can impact on the social benefit to the world, and thinking about how you can make your own contribution and your own impact into developing and achieving and addressing the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. I'm going to stop there. I'm not sure whether we're going to have the opportunity for questions or not, but I will take down my slides and see where we go from there. Thank
We
you
will
all
have-
very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Professor Miller. We will definitely have the opportunity of taking questions from the students. But before that, I'd like to thank you for the insightful and inspiring session. And we would also like to congratulate the University of West Scotland and you for the huge contribution that you are doing for improving the aspects of labor market and research and employability. And the eye opener, I must say, through your session was when you said that artificial intelligence may not take the jobs, but someone who uses the artificial intelligence might. So that was one of the eye opener for all of us. But here we have in our two rooms, Dr. Gayatri and Dr. Gaurav, who will be taking questions, who will be connecting us to the students. Are they able to hear us? Do we have any questions, Dr. Gayatri, Dr. Gaurav?
Yes,
Hello.
Dr. Shalini, sure, we have questions, some questions from the students. Sir, really the session is very nice and every student got overwhelmed with a lot of information. And finally, you finished the session with the changes will definitely should start from the self. That is very, very important takeaway, key takeaway of the session. And we have some questions like what is the role of mentoring in terms of maintaining this SDG? That is the question to you, sir.
Super, thank you. What a really good question. Mentoring is really important at a whole number of levels, but let me talk a wee bit about mentoring at the individual level. And I suspect that many of the students already have mentors in an informal way, but might not even call them mentors. And these are people who you will go to for advice and guidance and so on. Trusted individuals who will challenge your thinking as well as give you some feedback and give you some further food for thought. But also, I would say at a collective level, institutions also have mentors. And the way I see this is who are the best in class at delivering what it is that you want to deliver? And which institutions might you go to work with who have the same value set that you have, the same aims and objectives that you have, and then how can you work together to really ensure that what you can achieve together is much greater than the sum of your two individual parts. So mentorship at an individual level, absolutely really essential. Do not think that once you've left university, you will no longer need a mentor. You will need a mentor at every stage in your career. It will be a different mentor for each stage in your career. And I still have a mentor, I still have a coach, and I still ensure that they are challenging my thinking and challenging my way of working as well.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for the very good answer. And related to the green technologies, here we have a live example in Tashkent. There is one ocean called RLC. And, it got fully drained and there is no water here. So question is that in what way, what is the reason for these kind of sudden changes and how it can be taken back? What is the thing that we have to follow up, best practices to withstand the green technologies as it is one of the goal of SDG?
So I'm obviously not familiar with whatever's happened in Tashkent, but one of the things, so my answer might not cover exactly what you've asked about. So do come back if it doesn't. But one of the responsibilities that developers of green technologies have is to ensure that that technology itself does not create more problems than it is actually going to resolve. And this is one of the issues, for example, that some campaigners feel is the problem with wind turbines, for example, both onshore and offshore, or whether or not that the creation of dams for hydropower creates a greater environmental problem for local environments and so on. So the way in which I think we deal with this is that every project that comes forward, whether it's green technologies or indeed any other, it could be a housing project, for example, must undertake an impact assessment to look at a variety of different factors. It could be economic, it could be cultural, it could be environmental, and by that it could be ecological as well. So every project that involves the development of a green technology, because that was the question that you asked, should have an impact assessment to ensure that it's actually not going to do a greater harm than the solution it's trying to resolve.
Refining a little bit the question of Dr. Gayatri, Professor Miller, it was about the Aral Sea that is spread across Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan. And due to some reasons, the Aral Sea is now dried up, and the whole area, the seabed or the lake bed, has become desert. And because of that, the whole area is really into a lot of trouble because of a lot of health issues that the people are facing. The area is high in salt there. The land has become infertile, and the air is full of say salt, where the people are facing a lot of respiratory problems and such. So I think she was asking about that phenomena that happened a few years back. But Kazakhstan, I think, is trying to replenish, and even Uzbekistan government right now. But I think it has more or less it has answered the question. It has answered.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you, Dr. Shalke.
Thank you. Do we have any more questions?
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, sir, you're audible.
Professor Miller, thank you so much for enlightening us today with the latest in the UN Sustainable Development Goal and how artificial intelligence is shaping our education industry. This question is also related to the amalgamation of the artificial intelligence and the UN Sustainable Goal. Now you have talked about how we can use generative AI like ChatGPT, which is the large language models, and we must encourage students as well. And it is not going anywhere because it's already a $140 billion industry with each year it will increase by 20%. Now the question is that one training of LLM produces around 680 tons of carbon. So, which is equivalent to 5 times what a car produces, one single car produces. Now, with this race in the artificial intelligence and the carbon footprint it is giving us, there seems to be an imbalance in the trade-off. So, how we can plan on achieving this SDG if we cannot stop the development of technology? So, there's a bit of policy changes which may be required and how we are supposed to deal with it. Thank you, sir.
Yes, I agree entirely, and this is similar to the previous question around as we are developing more and more technologically based solutions, or apparently technologically based solutions. How do we make sure that they themselves are not creating more of the problems? And therefore, the technological developments must include things like how do we reduce carbon emissions from the technology themselves, or how can we use those in different ways? So as you will all know, for example, large-scale computing creates a huge amount of heat. It takes up a huge amount of energy. And I know of a number of projects where, for example, that heat is being rechanneled into bigger buildings to offset the carbon that would have been used to heat the building, because the heat is now being generated from supercomputers and indeed other aspects. So there is still a long way to go as far as that is concerned. But the technology firms have a responsibility, and they need to be made aware of their responsibility for developing products that are not going to create, as a side product, a greater problem than the one that they are trying to resolve. There are some that are out there at the moment, like, for example, that redevelopment or the redirection of heat so that it avoids carbon use elsewhere. And there are others in that similar sort of vein. So it might be used for heating water, for example, rather than using fossil fuels to heat water. So there are these byproducts that need to be thought about. But your question is a very valid one, and one for which there is no straightforward answer at the moment, because the race towards ensuring that the next development of the next version of large language modules or large language models is developing at such a rate that we've now got this technology companies racing each other and not thinking about the impact that they are having on the environment.
And as you mentioned earlier, sir, I think impact assessment is one of the major part of bringing in new solutions.
We'll take one or two more questions if we have. Dr. Gaurav, any question from your side?
Am I audible now?
Yes, sir, you're audible.
Yeah. So just one thing like that the professor said, that now we and the students both we are using generative AI and ChatGPT in our daily life. So first thing is that how to tell the student or tell us what is the ethical and ethical. There is a very thin line between an ethical and ethical way to use ChatGPT and these kind of AI tools. And the second thing, the power of thinking and analytical skills are going down. We are just give our query to ChatGPT and give us the answer. And suddenly, sometimes we are not checking the answer even what they are giving to us and directly use it. So how we, resolve this issue one more for the student as well?
Yeah, it's very tempting, isn't it, just to plug in a question and take the answer. But a meta skill that students need to develop is that ability to question what they are being told. And you must be doing this in your daily lives. If we think about the fact that you will not, I assume and dearly hope that you do not believe everything that you read on social media, that you do not believe everything in an unquestioning way, things that you will read in the newspapers, for example. And that same principle must apply to the use of large language models, and making sure that of course, use it, but use it in that questioning way. Use it to help you frame an argument, not make an argument. Help it to construct something, not necessarily for it to be the answer. It's not always going to give you the answer that you are looking for. And I'd go back to the advice that I gave earlier on. Go into these large language models, ask them about you, and see whether or not it tells you absolutely everything about you, and whether what it does tell you is an accurate reflection of you. It's a very simple way of understanding that what you are being told is not entirely accurate. So you must use it in that ethical way. In terms of how you use it and how you use it in that transparent way is really no different from the way in which you would provide a reference in an academic paper, where you are acknowledging someone else's work, where you are using someone else's argument to make a point or to counter a point that you want to make, then you acknowledge it. You are upfront, you are open, and you are transparent. And you must use ChatGPT or any of the other LLMs in exactly the same way. Be open, transparent, and be very clear about what you are doing. But an exercise for all, including for our educators, is to get them to think about, use it as an exercise, get them to take something out of ChatGPT and then critically appraise it, critically analyze it, and then evaluate as to whether or not it's giving them the information that they truly need. And by doing that, they will quickly learn to question what they are being told in the same way that they might be questioning what they are told through social media or indeed any other media channels.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gaurav, Dr. Gayatri, and Professor Miller. Thank you so much with that wonderful thought. Because of the paucity of time, we'll not be able to take any more questions, but with the hope that we'll definitely be able to see you again, meet you probably here in Tashkent. So for your time, for your insights, we'd like to present you a certificate of appreciation. If we have Dr. Dinesh, yes. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Professor Miller, for your time. On behalf of the whole Amity family, we'd like to thank you for your time and your insights.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. And before we leave, I'd request Dr. Sudhanshu for the formal vote of thanks, please.
Thank you, Dr. Salki. It is a profound honor for me to extend my heartful thanks to Dr. Miller as well as each of you for your presence and contribution for this international lecture series, Talk to Make Successful. Dr. James Miller, sir, we are truly grateful for your exceptional lecture. Your deep expertise and thought-provoking insights on the technology, society, and SDGs have been an eye-opener for all of us. Thank you, sir, for your time and efforts in sharing your profound knowledge with us. Our special thanks to Dr. Atul Chauhan, sir, our visionary chancellor, whose steadfast leadership continues to drive Amity University toward global excellence. Sir, your commitment to fostering international collaboration and promoting educational innovation is the bedrock of such events, and we are all grateful for your guidance and inspiration. A special thanks to Mr. Amol Chauhan, sir, trustee of Amity University. Sir, your strategic vision and support have been crucial in expanding the university's reach and establishing a strong academic relationship. Dr. Gurinder Singh, sir, our dynamic group vice chancellor, sir. Sir, we thank you for your leadership and constant encouragement in creating a global platform for academic and research excellence. Sir, your efforts in bringing together world-class educators and researchers have been instrumental in the success of these kind of events. Our special thanks to our director, Mr. Babur Abdullev of Amity University in Tashkent. Sir, your role in facilitating these collaborations have been invaluable. Your dedication to promote international exchange has enriched our academic environment, and we are grateful for your ongoing support. Finally, our esteemed First Deputy Director, ma'am, Dr. Naina Chaudhary, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am, for your tireless work, guidance, support, and commitment to enhance the quality of education and research at Amity University in Tashkent. We are very thankful to have a mentor like you with us, ma'am. Last but not the least, on behalf of everyone present, I express our deepest gratitude to all our distinguished audience, the students and professors of Amity University in Tashkent. All of your contribution today have made this event a remarkable success, and we look forward to organize many more such enriching collaborations in the future. Thank you all once again. Thank you very much.
Professor Miller, thank you so much. And we would love to host your visit to Tashkent. It is such a pleasure to hear you today. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.